All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Rachel Abrams, and I am the Fear Free Certified Practice Manager. So, with that, I do want to introduce Dr. Jennifer Conrad. She is the founder and director of the Paw Project, and she has dedicated her life's work to helping put an end to feline decline. And so, we at Fear Free are very excited to be partnering with her. And this is the first of several things that we'll be bringing to you throughout the rest of the year. So, without further ado, Dr. Conrad, please finish your introduction and let's get started.
Well, thank you, Dr. Abrams. Thank you to Fear Free for giving me this audience. I think that I have an interesting story to tell, and I hope that by telling it, then we can all become on one page about declawing. My name is Jennifer Conrad. I'm a veterinarian. I went to UC Davis, and I got interested in declawing because I was working with wildlife, and this was one of my patients. Now this is Kona. He was declawed when he was about 4 months old, and by the time he was 2, he couldn't really walk. And here he is at 11 years old when he becomes my patient. And I felt like I was a fairly new veterinarian at the time, and I felt like I really have to do something for this animal. He's crippled, and I feel like veterinary medicine is about healing animals. So what can I do to help him? So just to review, declawing is the removal of the third phalanx. Now, like in our fingers, this is a lion's paw, and I'm showing you lions and big cats because it's so much easier to see what goes on with them, but their anatomy is the same as little cats. The first phalanx, the second phalanx, and the third phalanx. And the bones are cushioned by these soft pads that we all call toe beans on the underside. And these work in an interesting way because they make it so the cat walks fairly silently. And as you see, the claw sits up so that it stays sharp and you don't hear that click, 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 like when you hear a dog on a hardwood floor. Cats are fairly silent, and I think that helps with hunting. So the first way ever described of declawing was a full disarticulation, meaning that the third phalanx was removed. And with that, what would happen would be the pad would shift backwards because there's no longer anatomy holding it forward. And the second phalanx, P2, would begin to poke through the skin and very often get osteomyelitis in the distal aspect of the second phalanx. And here's an example of a bobcat who was declawed as a baby, and here he is at 5 years old. And this is the pad, this is the normal digital pad, and this is the bone coming through, and this is a callus. And you can see that what happened to him was that he, and this is full of pus, is that that second phalanx was not cushioned any longer, and so it broke through the skin. And here's a radiograph of a cougar with the same problem, and you can see that this area is covered in osteomyelitis, and I mean this is osteomyelitis, and when we actually surgically opened this up, this was gravel. There was a lot of gravel in here. So veterinarians came up with the second way of declawing, which was a partial digital amputation where they left the flexor tubercle. And by doing so, they were hoping to keep the paw pad in its normal anatomical position and therefore avoiding that hammer toe, that osteomyelitis that happens when there's a full disarticulation. But what happens then is you get either this is a jaguar who was declawed as a baby, and his nail tissue followed with the deep digital flexor, and it began to abscess here. This is actually abscess in his paw, and when we opened that up, it was full of little tiny nails trying to grow. And if you take more of the deep digital, if you take more of the flexor tubercle, then you get like what this leopard had, which is where she's walking on this sort of pebble in a shoe. And this is osteomyelitis in the hammer toe, where the third phalanx is almost all removed. So again, it doesn't work to declaw that way. Here's a tiger who they tried a different way of declawing, and that was that they tried to ablate the germinal tissue with a electrocautery. They went in and tried to ablate the germinal nail tissue with electrocautery, and you can see that the nails are just basically growing under the skin. And here's what we removed surgically. And just in case you want to know, it didn't smell good. So that prompted me to write this paper about the deleterious effects of onychectomy in these big cats. And it was so well received that the entire zoo community all of a sudden decided that they were against declawing these big cats. Here's a little example of, this is a lion, an African lioness, and this is the surgery. So just because people want to know, we open up the toe. This is that that flexor tubercle, and you can see how sharp it is. And then what we do is we remove that. Here's the, this is pus. We remove that third phalanx, what's left of it, and then we actually sew the tendons back together so that the toes are shorter, but they have this function to be able to flex and extend. You can see here also that in the toes that where we've surgically addressed each of the toes where we've have had surgery, you can see that the pad's been pulled up forward so that it now cushions the second phalanx again. And in these two toes, which we have not done surgery, you can see that this is the tip of the second phalanx and the pad is sitting back. But all along when I was doing this, people asked me, isn't a cat a cat? And isn't the claw the same as a claw? And here's a claw from a lion and a claw from a domestic cat. And isn't declawing the same? This is the scalpel method, and this is what happens with the scalpel method. Again, osteomyelitis very often, if they get that hammer toe and they traumatize that tip of the second phalanx, they very often will have a osteomyelitis that needs to be addressed. And here's a cat just like that bobcat who has an abscess, and you can see the digital pads are regressing and that this callus is forming again, where because the second phalanx is where the cat is walking. And even with laser, isn't it the same? Because again, it's the removal of that third phalanx, and it's going to change the anatomy, and it's going to change the way the cat walks, and so it's not better. And this is an interesting outcome of a laser. A laser has the potential of causing what's called 4th-degree burns, which is something that you don't hear regularly. You don't hear about 4th-degree burns, but they're actually burning of the bone. And that's what this cat was suffering. The most common way to declaw is the rescos, and this is the way that the surgery was first described. But again, it causes these same problems where you have this third phalanx. This flexor tubercle could be either behind the second phalanx or in front of. In this toe that was where it was in front, of course, nail was growing. And in this toe where it was behind, of course, it was a hammer toe situation. And there's the nail regrowing. And this is from one clinic. This is domestic cats. This is from one clinic in a 6-month period of repairing toes. These are all the third phalanges that were collected, just to show how many cats had to have their paws repaired and how many cats had this third phalanx remnant, the flexor tubercle still in. Sometimes people will tell me, well, I have declawed cats and there's nothing wrong with them. And I think that people don't understand how subtle it can be. And then, I'm sorry, this is a bad picture, but it was, I don't know that many declawed cats anymore. And this is just shows you that in this toe where it's not declawed, you can see how oval and how supple these toe beams are. And then here where he is declawed, You can see how they're atrophying already. And this is a cute cat because I've been showing you horrible, horrible things. Okay, so a lot of people ask me, why have I chosen to use legislation as a way to stop declawing instead of education? And I wanted to give you an idea of why. Laws may not change the heart, but they can restrain the heartless. And everyone knows that there's always that one vet who's declawing or not listening or not using proper pain medication. And then to even out the playing field, it's not fair when fear-free vets stop declawing if the guy down the street just picks up all the slack. So I wanted to tell you why I've chosen legislation. The legality and ethics of declawing worldwide would just know that declawing is illegal in most of the rest of the world. If it's not illegal, it's considered unethical and therefore not practiced. But it is illegal in the United States in 9 US cities, 3 US counties, the entire state of New York. And in Canada, it's now 7 of the 10 provinces have banned declawing. And it's considered unacceptable in most of the rest of the world. And in the rest of the world, people in those countries are not dying from cat scratches, and cats in those countries are not dying because they can't be declawed. So there's a precedent for banning declawing. In the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons in the UK considers declawing a mutilation. And so do all these countries. And this is just a smattering of them. There are many countries who consider it a mutilation, whether like some countries don't have an actual law about declawing itself because they don't do it. But I found it interesting that Veterinary Ireland had this to say: it's an act of mutilation, it derives no benefit to the cat. And while commonly performed in the USA, that's a little dig against the USA. If a veterinarian in Ireland were to do it, that veterinarian would be subject to disciplinary actions. So we have support for banning declawing. We have animal welfare organizations, rescue organizations. So many rescue organizations and shelters will have a strict no declaw policy in their adoption contract. And as you know, these are people who really want to get a cat a home. But on this alone, they won't adopt that cat because they know they're going to get it back. It's going to be biting or not using the litter box. And then it's way harder to find that cat a home. The opposition tends to be the veterinary trade organizations. Some veterinarians I've had veterinarians tell me it's their bread and butter to declaw cats. I've had other veterinarians tell me that they make $75,000 or $85,000 a year declawing and they're never going to stop. Some breeders, even though most breeders are against declawing itself, they don't want anything that gives an animal property, anything other than property status. And of course, libertarians they don't want any laws. But I wanted to go through the myths that are perpetuated by the opponents to educate you on the true facts of why declawing should no longer be performed in veterinary medicine. So we often hear, well, the way that I declaw, it's safe and it's a risk-free surgery, and it's better that I do it than the hack down the street. I always hear that. There are humane and painless ways to declaw, such as using a laser. I always hear that. Declawing is necessary to protect owners with immunocompromising disease. Declawing is the only way to keep a cat from damaging furniture, or declawing saves the lives of cats who otherwise would be relinquished or dumped in the shelter or thrown outside. Well, these are laughable. So let me show you the literature on declawing. First, I want to introduce you to Alfred Meisner, who in 1952 published this in JAVMA in the letters, I think it was in the letters to the editor, and it's about how he decided to start declawing cats. And if you read this, I think you would have a heart attack because he uses so little anesthetic and he uses the Rescos, and he talks about how the cats are fine in 96 hours. But the real literature shows the truth, which is that it seems unthinkable that an elective surgery performed on 1/4, in some places even more, maybe even close to a half of American cats, could lack definitive evaluation, but it appears to be the case. But let's talk about what we do know. We do know that the pain of declawing is considered moderately severe to severe. It's on the same level as limb amputation and total ear canal ablation cancer pain. We do know that there's a chronic pain syndrome described in declawed cats, and there's ways to try to alleviate that. And we do know that the chronic pain syndrome talks about not only chronic pain, but behavioral changes, which may include decreased activity, decreased appetite, or increased aggression. We do know that whenever you cut this is from human surgery, hand surgery, where they're trying to avoid the neuromas that you would get from removing from the same sort of surgery. And what they're talking about is the only way to stop a neuroma from forming is to not cut the nerve. But you can't not cut the nerve if you're amputating the third phalanx on a cat. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with what a neuroma is when a nerve is trying to figure out what happened to it, but it was cut. And normal nerve would be traveling through the paw like a sort of like a spaghetti strand. And when you cut it, the nerve sprouts and it becomes like a cauliflower. And when it becomes a cauliflower, it's super sensitive to touch. It probably aches all the time, and it's probably the source of phantom pain for these animals. So something to think about, that is how serious this is, and it's on 10 toes in the front, 8 toes in the back, or more if the cat is a polydactyl. We do know that typically cats undergoing onychectomy are not given any analgesics. Now that might seem completely absurd to you because you guys are fear-free and you understand how important analgesics are, but this is the case. And although paper is old, we still talk to declawing veterinary practices, and they say, well, cats don't do well on pain medications, so we give none. We do know that a cat in extreme pain will often curl up in the back of its cage, and it might even be purring, but that's not the purr, I'm a healthy, happy animal purr. That is the self-soothing purr, where they're in distress and they're trying to self-soothe. It's often trivialized, declawing, and by clients as well as veterinarians. It's even called declawing when it really should be called deknuckling if people wanted to accurately describe what the surgery is. Declawing trivializes it because so much of the public thinks that means that you're just some magical wave, some magical manicure that a veterinarian can give that removes the nail bed but doesn't hurt the cat. And we all know that that's not the case. There is another paper that I think is really imperative to read if you are at all unconvinced by what I'm telling you, because this pain and adverse behavior in declawed cats is available on ISFM. International Society of Feline Medicine on their website is for free, and you can download the entire paper because it's so important that that people understand that declawed cats had an increased incidence of biting, not using a litter box, back pain, and over grooming. And we all know that cats overgroom when they are in pain or in distress. So here are some photos to show what happens to declawed cats. Again, you've seen these, but I just wanted you to see that the complications are real, and that even in the journals, it says owners should be aware of the high complication rate. Here's a cat who lost his paws because someone had wrapped the bandages too tight. So in the literature, it actually says 50% of cats will have immediate complications and 20% will have long-term complications. In my experience, I think it's much greater than that, but this is what's reported. Again, complications. Now, what we know also about declawing is that 76% of declaws are performed on cats that are fewer than 8 months old. Now, in the AVMA, in their former position statement on declawing, they said it had to be a last resort after all the humane alternatives had been exhausted. But how could that possibly be true on a cat who's fewer than 8 months old? I mean, how can you have trained a cat who's fewer than 8 months old? They're still doing their cat things. And, you know, no one goes to, when a cat goes to scratch on the couch, kitten, for instance, no one, people go to think about declawing, but when a puppy chews on the couch, no one really goes to, hey, let's remove all the teeth. We do know that 95% of declawed cats, the declaws are for household furniture protection. So I always tell people, I don't know about you, but I went to vet school to protect cats, not couches. So I don't think that's a good reason. And we do know that 33% are performed for no specific reason. They're in a kitten package, or they're thrown in to supersize a spay or neuter, but there's no specific reason. There's no the owner didn't even know why they were asking for declawing. Again, complications. So declawing and relinquishment. This is one of those myths that I always hear, that if you can't declaw the cat, then it's going to get dumped and the shelters are already teeming with cats. So it's better that I declaw this cat and it keep its home. Well, unfortunately, declawed cats lose their home. And in the literature, it even says they lose their home. If you look at a multivariate analysis of why cats lose their homes, they lose their homes at a higher rate because they were declawed. And Alley Cat Allies, which is an organization, probably the world's largest organization dedicated to keeping cats where they belong, they believe that declawing doesn't keep cats in their homes. And this is very interesting data from where the declaw bans were first implemented in the United States. And these are all cities that have their own municipal shelters. And the blue line is the number of cats who were lost their homes. Lost their homes before the ban went into effect in that city. And the red line is the number of cats who lost their homes in the 5 years after the ban went into effect in that city. So you can see that the numbers are less than the 5 years before the ban. So the ban did not cause this massive deluge into the shelters of cats who couldn't be declawed. And what I think is really important to know is that in Los Angeles, which is a city of like 4.2 million people, that the declaw ban decreased the number of cats relinquished to the shelter, according to the head of LA Animal Services. I'm not saying it did. She says it is. Her name is Brenda Barnett, and she writes that the declaw ban saved the lives of tens of thousands of cats, because they're not getting cats who are biting. They're not getting cats who aren't using the litter box. And she says, we can all surmise that if someone was intolerant of a cat scratching the couch, they're really going to be intolerant of a cat not using the box or biting more. So declawed cats were losing their homes at a rate that you wouldn't expect, because everyone thought by declawing you're keeping a cat in the home. And she says no, and it's the best thing that they've done. And it had such a sharp decrease when the ban went into effect that she really does believe it has to do with the ban. So then I also hear that declawing has to have, we have to protect the thin-skinned, oncomedin, autistic, hemophiliac, whatever situation people think will help protect human health. But remember that the CDC, the National Institutes of Health, and the Infectious Diseases Society of America, the HIV Medicine Association, the Canadian Medical Association, a US Public Health Service, by the way, they all say declawing is not advised to protect the health of humans. I think that we all know that declawed cats are more likely to bite and less likely to use the litter box. So I think that biting, if you were to call the emergency room and say, hey, I got scratched by my cat, they would probably say to you, well, wash it and watch it. But if you called the emergency room and said, hey, I got bitten by my cat, they're going to tell you to come in. And 1/3, according to the Mayo Clinic, 1/3 of cases of cat bites who had to come into the emergency room get admitted for IV antibiotics. So a cat bite is way more dangerous, and declawed cats bite more. And I also hear about cat scratch fever, and as veterinarians, we all know that cat scratch fever is a total misnomer because it's infected flea feces getting into any wound. So if I had been able to name it, I would have named it flea poop paper cut fever, because that is more, then it wouldn't implicate cats. So the reason to stop declawing is there's a growing amount of scientific evidence that declawing causes long-term pain and suffering, that it's going to be illegal as more and more places. So you might as well be ahead of the curve. And despite the growing number of veterinarians who say, I won't do it, the reason that it has to become illegal is because there's always that one vet. And also, because I think if there's a blanket protection, that it helps veterinarians, because many veterinarians don't want to do it, and they feel emotionally blackmailed by the person who brings the cat in and says, well, if you don't do it, I'm going to euthanize this cat. Well, that, first of all, that doesn't happen. There's a survey that I think is really interesting that looks at the number of veterinarians who anticipated that that the owner would relinquish or euthanize their cat, and veterinarians anticipated 50% would get rid of their cat if they couldn't have it declawed. But when you actually go back and you interview those owners, the number was more like 4% who threatened to declaw. I mean, if they couldn't declaw, that they would get rid of the cat. So that's a huge discrepancy. So, but making it illegal makes it so that the veterinarian's off the hook. It's illegal. I can't do it. No, you can't do it, and the guy down the street can't do it. So, the cat is safe. I find that that the repair surgery, which we're going to discuss in our next webinar, is a great way to educate people about what an effort it is to help these cats once they've been declawed, and how much damage they're actually suffering with. I just wanted to let you know that this is ISFM. If you're not aware of them, they have that paper I was telling you about, and they are the international organization that protects cats, and they're talking about how it's mutilation is unethical and it should be banned. Now, in regard to declawing and fear-free, I think that I'm hoping I'm preaching to the choir, because you are enlightened veterinarians or enlightened veterinary workers, and you're already sensitive to the needs of animals, and letting them keep their claws is completely consistent with that empathy that you already have. I wanted to make sure that you know that the industry has changed, that VCA, Banfield, Blue Pearl, and many other chains of veterinary hospitals have stopped declawing. So if the industry is changing, if they are recognizing the pain that these cats are suffering, and then it's not worth it, I think that we all need to recognize that. I think that one of the most important things I found from veterinarians who voluntarily have stopped declawing is they have consistently across the board said, I make more money now that I don't do it, because people are seeking out a humane veterinarian. My staff is so happy and they want to stay. I don't have this constant turnover of upset vet techs or receptionists or kennel help, whatever. They don't have that turnover, and their clients are much happier because they're thinking, this is a vet who's given up the money they could make from declawing and wants to do the right thing for my cat. This is a good vet. So here are some, I just wanted you to think about these alternatives in case you get approached by someone who wants to declaw, and to make sure that you know that there are many humane alternatives. Remember that in the rest of the world, they don't declaw, and they have thin-skinned people, let's say London or Berlin or wherever city, Zurich, they don't declaw. They have thin-skinned people on Coumadin, HIV positive, autistic, hemophiliacs, and they don't declaw because they know that there are these humane alternatives. And remember also that a lot of people will say to me, well, in Europe, cats are outdoors. And if you've ever been to London or Berlin or Zurich or many other places, cats are not outdoors. They are in buildings with, just like we have them here. So of course, there's scratching pads, scratching posts. There are cat trees. And these are good because, you know, cats feel more comfortable. I'm sure you've learned in your fear-free education that cats feel more comfortable having places that are their own. There are excellent ways to cut nails. These are for the timid. These are Zen clippers, and they have a little funnel, and the claw can go into it, and then you're less likely to cut the quick. There's soft paws. Now, soft paws are vinyl sheaths that you can put over the nail, and this is not something I would say you should do permanently. This is a chance for you to remedy the problem. You put these on, and then they have to teach the cat where is appropriate to scratch in the meantime. So this is a way to protect either skin or furniture while you're teaching the cat the right way to handle its claws. There's also this clipnosis, which mimics the mother cat who, you know, carrying her baby. You know how when a baby is held, it goes sort of limp. And this is a way to mimic that. And you can put it on for just just a minute or so while you clip the nails. Feel Away helps with calming cats. There's double-sided sticky tape that you can put on furniture to prevent a cat. They don't like they go to touch it, they don't like it, and so they'll stop scratching there. The other thing is, when choosing furniture, don't choose burlap, choose microfiber or something like that. The cats can't really scratch that. There's this Royal Canin Calm cat food, which I'm not sure how easy that is to get anymore, but it used to really help. And remember that cats are absolutely trainable. Clicker training is a way to train cats. If you find something that motivates a cat, then they're way more trainable than if you don't have something. And these Inavachurus are really, cats love these, and it's a great way to get them to want to participate in the training session. And remember, finally, that the question is not can they reason nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And we, as people who care about animals, want to do the best we can to prevent suffering. Finally, I would like to leave you with this idea that compassion is something that we talk about a lot in veterinary medicine. You want to be a compassionate vet, but remember that compassion has a very wide berth. You can kill an animal unnecessarily with compassion. You can declaw with compassion. But if you narrow your focus and you decide whether you're going to do a procedure, if you use empathy as your guide and you decide, I think you have a much narrower wiggle room. And I don't think that anyone with empathy would say that they think declawing is a good idea. Now, people always throw out, well, what about spay neuter? The difference is that spay neuter helps all animals in the future. And until we have a better way of controlling overpopulation in animals, we have to do spay neuter. So I wanted to thank you, all of you, for thinking so much about animals, and Dr. Becker and his team for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. And if you have any questions, please contact the Paw Project. It's info@pawproject.org, and we get back to you. And I hope that that was informative and gives you some feeling that you can talk to your practice owner, or you can be an advocate for ending declawing, because there really is no good reason to declaw a cat. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Conrad. That was wonderful. A little painful to watch at times, but good information. So I really thank you for that. So far, we don't have any questions in the question and answer window, so I'll give people a few more minutes to see if they have any of those. It may be that you've done this enough time that you've already answered all their questions. We have a couple other questions come in. One is for chronic fungal infections of the nail bed. Is declawing a consideration and option? So Dr. Conrad, I'll let you answer that.
So here's what I would say to that is, you remember that if you remove the claw, and if the skin has a chronic fungal infection, it's sometimes very hard to heal that wound. And so I recommend the dermatologist offering you direct treatment for that one claw or nail or toe or whatever it is. It is until you're absolutely backed into, you have no other choice. But remember that if you do that surgery, the skin has been compromised by the fungus, and it very often will dehiss over and over again, and you'll be sorry that you did it.
Okay, good, thank you for that. We had another question about fellow scratch. I will say that people who used it according to directions had good success with it. It is actually no longer being actively manufactured in the US. And there was a question about the nail trimmers recommended. Was that the Zen clippers?
Yeah, so the Zen clippers are for people who are afraid of hurting cutting the quick. So there's a little funnel that receives the tip of the nail, and it's really hard to get more than just the tip into that funnel. So then when you cut it, you can feel fairly confident that you're not going to cut the quick.
Even though there are bans on declawing in certain countries and cities in the US, what about the special yellow powder they put on claws for clipping? I'm not sure what the question is. I'm imagining that's the quick stop, or we used to use that, or the styptic things, but I'm not sure what the question is. So
yeah, I don't know, but I can say that, obviously people have to use that quick stop if they cut the nail too short. That's why. And then once you cut the nail too short, then the cat's going to be afraid of having its nails cut. So you have to be very careful not to do that. And that's why I was recommending the Zen clippers for those people who are terrified of cutting the quick.
And then there was a question about scratching due to inner cat stress. And I'm not sure I understand that question either. It was asking about behavior meds. My knee-jerk reaction would be more environmental management and providing ways so that cats who don't get along don't have to interact. Again, if whoever wrote that question could elaborate on it, that would be great. We've got just a few more minutes for questions.
Remember also that there are veterinary behaviorists who are available, and they'll do an online consult with you or a telephone consult with you to help you see how to work with the cats to ensure that everyone gets to keep their claws and everybody gets to be happy. I think that there are medications that people use for inner cat relationships and the stress that causes. And cats often do, when they are stressed, they will go to scratch something like, as a way to deal with
fidget.
Yeah, but but I don't think that it's a normal feline behavior, and I think that we're better off trying to environmentally manage it than certainly better to environmentally or behavioral manage it than to surgically manage it.
Yeah. All right, that's all the questions that we have at this time. So Dr. Conrad, would you mind putting up your email info slide again? That way, if people missed it the first time, they can get it now. So the info@pawproject.org. So with that, I do want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you all very much for attending. I hope you'll recommend that your colleagues watch this webinar, and I hope that everyone has a good rest of their evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad.